Before we kick off today, I just want to let you know that we have an exclusive newsletter that shares lots of information, tips and tricks about building your ideal business. If you want to find out more and jump on and subscribe to this, check out the show notes below and subscribe to our newsletter. Hi, it's Paul Antonelli here, and welcome to another episode of the Ideal Business Podcast. Today I'm going to talk about something, it's just a bit of a philosophy that I have, because part of this is obviously part of the process of building an ideal business is to look at what habits or practices or what could you do and the sort of things, and how do you operate in a way and how do you live your life in a way that will enable you to live your ideal business and your ideal life and have an ideal business that supports that ideal life. And one of the things that I've found that works really well, and I'm going to go through and share some insights into this. It's a really interesting insight, but I have found it to be very true and works pretty much all the time. And it's one of those things that would not work that well if everyone did it. It's pretty interesting. So it wouldn't work. This approach wouldn't work that well if everyone did it. But the reality is that most people aren't going to do this. So what is it? What is it, that thing that you can do that will just, will set you on a different path than most people and enable you to achieve things that most people might not be able to do? And it's a very simple philosophy. The philosophy is basically, and I know this is going to sound crazy, the philosophy is basically seeing and looking at what most people are doing and don't do that. So that's the philosophy. Have a look around, see what most people are doing, and don't do that. Why do I think? What do I know that this is a really important philosophy or an approach? Because I've just seen it behaved, and if I look around at, and I'm known for doing stuff that most people don't do, and some of the best experiences I have and most of the successes I've achieved is because I'm doing stuff that most people don't do. So it's not. It's almost what it is a way of thinking, because it's really easy for us to be comfortable and follow the line, and someone else has done that and that worked for them, and most people are doing this, so that makes sense. And often when I'm having conversations with my wife, Robin, about things, I might throw some idea out there, and then she might say, the next statement she'll say is, well, most people, and blah, 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 blah. and then she looks at me and she knows, well, she said, we're not most people, are we? And I said, no, we're not most people. So I sort of know I'm on the track when I'm doing something if the reality is that most people don't do it. So it's almost like a tick box for me. So an example would be if we've chosen to homeschool our kids. They're not kids anymore, they're all adults, good adults, I like them all. But, we homeschooled them up until the age of 15, 16 years old. Most people don't do that. And there was reasons behind it, don't know if it worked well for them, it worked well for us. We're able to have flexibility. We could sort of, we could hang out and get to engage with them, for longer, as opposed to just sending them off to school when they're 5 or 6 years old. So that was something that most people don't do that, and we did it, and it worked really well for us. I guess another thing to look at is, obviously, I talk a lot about business, sort of been in for decades. And one of the things is that, really to have control over your life and control over your time, which is what we're really trying to achieve. They're the two sort of edges, is that business is a great vehicle for doing that. And, being able to earn income in a business, even when you're not doing anything, enables you to have better control over time and earn more money for less time input. Yeah, that's an obvious thing. That most people don't do that. And even when we talk about business, engage with business owners at all levels, people that are just operating their own business with themselves, might have 1 or 2 staff members or larger businesses. And what happens is, in these businesses, that if we don't understand and work out a way of getting ourselves out of there, then you just end up running a business and doing more hours. And so when you look at small businesses, most people tend to be running the business themselves, necessarily employ people, could be making good money, but actually very poor control over time. And that's something that it's been really obvious that, just in the last week, I'm reflecting, people that I've engaged with. I was at a mechanics workshop, guys doing some work with us on different projects, all sorts of things. There's an exchange of time for money. And it's not ideal, make good money, enjoy what you're doing, but it's actually not ideal. And so one of the things that most people do that I'd really encourage you not to fall into that trap or to move away from that is exchanging your time for money. Exchanging your time for money. It's very limited, and that's the reality of how, the market works, and when employment works is you exchange time, and once you deliver the time outcomes, you get paid so much money. That's very limiting. Obviously, to earn more money, you have to put in more time. So, and that's what most people do. Most people in life typically are exchanging time for money. So that's another thing that I would not recommend you do, is move away. And we may need to do that at the beginning, particularly when you're sort of kicking off a business. But the idea is to move away from time for money. So that's another example of something not to do. I've done some crazy stuff like, I drove my Vespa. I've got a couple of Vespas, and I drove my Vespa from Perth right across the country in Australia to Brisbane. I think it was 2018. It was just under 7,000 kilometres. I had a little trailer, and my Vespa service guy said, I've never seen a Vespa with a trailer, so I knew I was on the right track with that. Put a tow bar on it, put a small trailer, and then camped across the country. I did it over, I think it was 22 days camping across the country, covering just under 7,000 kilometres. I don't know anyone else that's done that, so that was something that's a pretty good experience. And looking at, and when I was planning, I'm not a really big planner, but when I was going through that, a lot of people saying, well, it's not a great idea, and how are you going to deal with the road trains, and you get really uncomfortable, you're going to get cramps, and I don't know, all sorts of reasons why it wouldn't be such a good idea. It only carries 8 litres of fuel, so you're going to have to be stopping every 5 minutes, and all sorts of reasons. I didn't bother, and I think that's something that happens is we get too concerned about what might happen, often the negatives, and it prevents us from moving forward, where we just go with the flow, have confidence in what you're doing, and see where it goes. So it was actually a really good trip. And funnily enough, most people that gave me advice didn't ride a motorbike and hadn't actually been across the country. That was my 9th trip across the Nullarbor, which is the main stretch across the country. I've done it in all sorts. So I knew that sort of stretch of road really well. I've done it quite a few times. So that's another thing. It was a great trip. Have you ever wanted to find out how ideal your business is? We put together a really cool tool that'll enable you to get your ideal business score. It's a fantastic tool. Check it out in the show notes and find out how ideal your business is. Back to the show. So I think one of those philosophies, and these are just some of the examples, but it's sort of really a bit of a checkbox. We had this COVID pandemic thing go on. I mean, I think we've moved on from that. Most people got vaccinated. I didn't get vaccinated. Didn't make sense to me, so that was my choice. So I looked at what was happening. I looked at all the information, and I decided not to get vaccinated. And I don't regret that. Knock on wood, haven't been sick or anything at the moment at all, so it's been good. So it's just a philosophy, and what sort of drove this a little bit, I remember, I'm just going to share a little bit of a story around this, is that with a lot of these ideas where you don't do what most people are doing, the way to think about it is that if everyone did this, then most people would be doing it and it wouldn't make sense anymore. But the reality is that we're looking for safety. We're not trying to take too much risk, a lot of unknowns, a lot of words, voices in our heads, voices around the place that stop us from doing things that maybe people haven't done before. I've just, last year I was traveling around. You would have seen listened to some of my podcasts or my videos that I created traveling around the countryside. And what I did was I had a small Land Rover and a camper, and I just did what most people didn't do and just camped in obscure locations all around the country. Off the grid, no power, no water supply, no showers, no toilets, and just basically pulled up and camped, whether it was in the desert, on a riverbed, on a creek, in the forest, wherever. And what I loved about that experience is that there was very few people wherever I was. Why is that? Because most people aren't doing that. Most people, when they're camping, will go to a caravan park or a designated parking area. I just don't do that. So it was another thing that gave me very unique experiences when we're traveling around. So it has become a bit of a philosophy. It's a bit of my people sort of expect that of me now. So the unexpected is pretty much expected. That's just how people think about me. And my philosophy of really just looking around and seeing what's going on and seeing what most people are doing, and I go, well, just make sure that I'm not doing that. I'm doing something outside of that. And it really applies. It's not necessarily what people are doing. It's just if that was working so well, and a really good example with how you earn your income or how you run your business or whatever. If it was working that well, we'd have really good control over our time, and be able to travel whenever we liked, have cash to do whatever we wanted. And if that was working, then I'd say, well, that's what we should be doing. But that's not the reality. The reality is, even if someone's earning good money, the exchange or the sacrifice is a lack of control over your time, over their time, and over where they can be. So they might have to be location specific or location bound. And so that is the reality of how it works for the majority of people. So if you've got a philosophy, so I look at what I'm doing in business, how do I run my businesses a little bit differently. I look at how I live my life, I look at the sort of things that I do, some of the adventures that I have, and what makes them, for me anyway, what makes them really interesting is that they've been less attempted, or people haven't tried to do that sort of stuff before. Gives us a bit of an edge of an unknown, and it's more likely to be a bit of fun, be a bit unique, and something that can result in some great stories. I love sort of building up stories. So yeah, that's a bit of a philosophy. It has worked, knock on wood, for myself, my family, my wife, what we do. It has worked really well for us, and I've sort of really, with my kids, my children, I've said, have a think about that. If you want to have a life that's less ordinary, you just got to do less of what most people are doing, and whatever that looks like. And I think it's just shaping a way of probably the key outcome, or the key belief in this process is, don't just follow a path because it's a tried and tested path and it's safe, and that there's a specific outcome. It might be something that suits you, but if you really want to explore, have a lot of fun in life, do things that most people don't do, get out there and experience things that most people don't experience, then the philosophy of effectively not only not doing what most people do, but actually do the opposite. Do the opposite. And if you can do that, you probably find that you'll have some amazing experiences, you'll open up possibilities, and you'll have some fantastic stories to share, because there's stories that most people don't have. So I've got a few stories like that I can share on different things that I've done. And the reality is that if I'd looked at most of the things I've done, if I'd looked at what most people would do in those situations, I would never have done any of those things, because no one was doing those things. It didn't really make sense. And what you can do is go, well, look, because no one is doing that, it really means it's probably not going to work, or it's not a good process, or it's not a good thing to do. That's just an assumption. It's not actually true. The reality is that it's not happening because no one's thought about doing it, or they've stayed on that path of doing what everyone else thinks is a safe space to be. So look, it's a bit interesting. Sometimes it can be a positive thing to look at that process. Sometimes it can be a bit frustrating for those around you, but I just find it works really, really well. So yeah, thanks for joining me in this podcast. So yeah, I'd really recommend you to have a look at what's going on around you, what most people are doing, and do something different. Do the opposite. If you want to have something, we have a bit more of an adventurous and extraordinary life. Hey, thanks for joining me, and I'll catch up with you in our next podcast. Ciao for now. Thanks for listening. As you know, we grow organically. It's really people like yourself that enable us to get the word out. If you like what you hear, please give us a rating, leave a good comment, and share this with your friends. Thank you.